I never took the first drink drunk. That's the insanity of alcoholism. My mother would do crazy stuff when she was drunk. All the normal drinkers you know, under the influence of the right amount, they'll do crazy stuff. The insanity of alcoholism is picking up the first drink without anything in my system, 28 days out of the Michigan State Penitentiary, with every reason in the world not to drink. They've just laid out the conditions for my parole, and I walk into a bar and break every condition of my parole and get away with it. And I do that at my very best, that first drink. The chapter to the wives describes 4 types of alcoholics. The doctor's opinion describes a few types of alcoholics. Of course, when I was new, I thought I was the guy normal in every respect except in the effect alcohol had on me. Able, intelligent, friendly. No. Then the psychopath, the manic depressive. By the time I was clear on the first step, I saw that I'm all those types. Any given moment, I can show you any given symptom if it meets the condition for me to get what I want. Take me to a sanitarium where there's drugs and doctors and nurses, and I'll display the symptoms to get the medication, to get what I want to do. You know. The chapter to the wives opened my eyes. Read it not too long ago when I was in Dallas with Mark. Type number 1. But take out the circumstance or how they're feeling. The craving hasn't really developed. They're not getting in that much trouble. That doesn't mean externally. You can have a vice president of a bank with the wife and the kids and the car and the clothes and the money. How are you going to help him see the unmanageability? How is he going to see? He's going to see that the craving doesn't have anything to do with the circumstances in his life. Or look at how you felt. It doesn't have anything to do with how I felt. Type number 2 has progressed a little further. Type number 3 has progressed a little further. Type number 4, totally out of options. Because the key to what Mark read about Dr. Bob's realization was alcoholism and its hopelessness. I'd been a counselor. I had worked in treatment. I knew enough about alcoholism to be dangerous to myself and everybody around me, but I didn't have the experience of its hopelessness. Because here's the first paradox of AA. Hope comes from hopelessness. False hope comes from hope in self. As long as you think you can do anything about it, that might feel like hope because it's comfortable, but it's always going to be rooted in what you can do to keep yourself sober. Absolute hopelessness, there is a hope and a willingness that comes from that like I never had in my life. With 23 to 43, you just continue to turn statements into questions. My book even says that the first step is not just to admit that you're powerless over alcohol and that your life is unmanageable. My big book says that you need to fully concede to your innermost self. That's an experiential description. A full concession to your innermost self that you're alcoholic. That's the first step in recovery. So we're going to look at the first step in 3 parts. Body and mind as far as powerlessness, and spiritual malady is the reason my life is unmanageable.
Mark, alcoholic. I want to talk about the spiritual malady. It is described, some words you use to describe it. 3 of the words are in doctor's opinion: restless, irritable, discontent. But if you turn to page 52, I think there's a paragraph that is an excellent tool to look at your current experience to find out where you had reconstruction of the ego or self-will run riot. It says we had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems this same readiness to change our point of view. We're having trouble with personal relationships. So like Joe said, you turn statements into questions and you say to yourself, am I? Look all around. Look at your relationships with people. If you have a relationship with a significant other, look at it. Is it direct? Is it honest? Is it loving? Is it kind? Is it considerate? Start to look around. How is it at work? How is it with your boss? How is it with your fellow employees? How is it with people in Alcoholics Anonymous? How is it with creditors? How is it with the in-laws? You begin to take a look at that. It says we couldn't control our emotional nature. Is that true? How do I react when somebody cuts me off in traffic? How do I react when somebody hollers at me? Those types of things. You begin to look at your current experience with your emotional nature. Says I'm a prey to misery and depression. Am I? Sit with that. Is there a possibility that that's going on? Says I couldn't make a living. Here, you're not only going to look at the issue of the money, but how about your life? Have you been able to make a life that you're satisfied with? Said we had a feeling of uselessness. You sit with that, ask yourself, is this me? Do I feel this way sometimes? You know the kind of people we are, right? You do something and there's 50 people there and 49 of them said fabulous and one said not so good, and that's all you can think about. Right? The feeling of uselessness. Where does that come from? Talks about we're full of fear, and sit with that. Am I? Begin to look at your life situation. Begin to look at your life. Begin to develop some awareness of yourself and ask yourself as you go through the day, where am I with this fear? Because we're going to talk about that, because the extent to which you're experiencing fear in any area of your life is the extent to which you are relying on self and not God. And you fall in, there's another trap. Here's what it is. I tell you that I believe in God and I believe it. But Joe said there's a litmus test. Is it working? If you have conscious contact with this power, you will not be experiencing fear, because you will not be relying on self, because you'll remember your third step decision, which is your life is no longer your business. So the extent to which you're experiencing fear is the extent to which you are again relying on self in any area of your life. It could be your physical health, it could be relationships, it could be anything. Start to take a look at that. Is there a lot more self-reliance going on than you think there is? It says we were unhappy. Am I? I joke with people sometimes about this, because you say, well, how you doing? Say, oh, I'm doing well. And I'll say, well, why don't you tell your face that? I mean, there's a meditation practice, Thich Nhat Hanh. He has a great book called Peace is Every Step of the Way. And one of the meditation practices, he makes you practice smiling. And you do it for a while, and he's absolutely right. And for you ladies, it greatly reduces wrinkles. So go around, practice smiling, even if you're not happy, right? So we can't seem to be a real help to other people. So ask yourselves, am I? Am I a team player at work? Where am I in my home group? That kind of a thing. And these are and then they go on, they use the term bedevilments, but I think that's a good way to find out where you're at with this thing called the spirituality. And in all of those areas that we just took a look at, depending on the intensity with which they're manifesting in your life, the malady is that they are blocking you from experiencing the only thing that's going to allow you to experience peace in an insane world, and that is your spirit. That which is already a part of God. That which is already a part of oneness. And the extent to which I'm blocked from that is the extent to which this spirituality stuff is going to begin to show up in my life. You're going to want to take a look at this. Why? Because a little later on in the book says, when the spirituality is overcome in me, I straighten out mentally and physically. That's why. The spirituality, which, by the way, we manufacture ourselves, comes about because I'm again relying on myself and I'm playing God and I'm once again self-will run riot. There's a connection. Because I've had people ask me, well, Mark, where does the spirituality come from? Well, it comes from self-will run riot. It comes from playing God. It comes from that sense of separation when you're relying on yourself. So you're going to sit back and take a look at that. That way we look at the first step in three different ways as we've talked about. Physically, mentally, and then we look at this concept of the spirituality or the unmanageability. See, here is another consideration I give people. Again, we talked about this. There's two schools of thought. I'm powerless over alcohol, and that's why my life's unmanageable. That's one. Here's another. My life was unmanageable. I took a drink. Alcohol treated the unmanageability. Unmanageability is an internal condition. It's how I experience my life and you and this thing called living. It lies within me. And if it's too uncomfortable, alcohol treats that, doesn't it? Go back to when alcohol worked, when it did its magic. It gave you a sense of oneness. We drink for the effect produced. You know, one of the greatest things I looked at after I've been sober for a while was I really started looking at the effect produced by alcohol. And I'll tell you what it did. Every promise in the ninth step, alcohol brought true for me. Every single promise that we read in meetings in the 9th step, alcohol did for me. And if I can't get that same kind of promises showing up in my life sober without alcohol, more likely I'm going to go back to alcohol again. So now we go back to page 44, having looked at that, the spiritual malady. It says, in the preceding chapters, you learned something of alcoholism. We hope we made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and non-alcoholic. And now the book does something. In one sentence, they sum up the first 54 pages of the book. Here's what they say. If, when Mark honestly wants to, Mark finds he cannot quit entirely, stop. What is your experience, Mark? Did you honestly want to quit entirely? Yes, many times. Were you able to do that on your power? Y'all know what the word quit entirely means, don't you? It means quit entirely. Yes, I wanted to do that. Based on your experience, Mark, could you pull that off? Were you able to pull that off? No, I was not. Or if when drinking, Mark, you have little control over the amount you take, stop. When you drank, Mark, did you have little control over the amount that you drank? No. Then the book says, well, then, Mark, based on your experience, you're probably an alcoholic. And if that's the case, Mark, you may be suffering from an illness which only, highlight that word. You all know what only means, right? Only. No other option a spiritual experience will conquer. The first step is a funnel, and at the bottom of it, what you're left with is dying an alcoholic death or a spiritual experience. Let me tell you why that's important. Get you real open-minded about God. See, I came to the first step the first time somewhere between an agnostic and an atheist. I'm sure there's a name for that guy, but I don't know what it is. When I saw my need for power, when I saw that this was me, I got very open-minded about God. Very open-minded. Because I'm left with nothing but only a spiritual experience. See, I hear this whenever I hear anybody in a meeting talk about the second step. I'm struggling with step 2 or 3, and I go, oh no. We'll talk about it this weekend about working the step backwards. Where a person says they're going to balk on the 9th step. We'll show you it's not the 9th step at all, it's the first step. Or if a person says, well, I'm having troubles with God. No, you're not. You haven't had a first step experience. Let me see. Die an alcoholic death, be willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Let me think. You see what I'm saying? You see what happens? You drink enough whiskey, you'll get real open-minded about the God issue. Why? Because you realize your need for power. That's why. You realize your need for power. And it goes on and talks about, in the next paragraph, here's my 2 options. There's door 1 and door 2. Now, Joe talked about the 0 step where we think there's door 3, 4, 5, but here's what door 1 is. Doomed to an alcoholic death, door 1, or live on a spiritual basis, door 2. What do you want to do? Your deal, your choice. My experience is God, the power behind the name, will not interfere with your choice. Why do I say that? Because God's love is unconditional. If my course of actions indicated I was not willing to live on a spiritual basis, my experience is God will never interfere with that. Because if God interfered with that, he would be interfering with supposedly his greatest gift to us, unconditional love. I don't know if that's true. I've been told that. I suspect it is. My most common response to most things anymore is, I don't know. You know, man of the cloth one day to try and tell me what's going to happen to me when I died. I asked him if he had any experience with that. He said, no. I said, then I'm not interested in your opinion. Big Book says the spiritual life's not a theory. I've got to live it. There's a lot of theories out there. A lot of theories in AA. My deal's simple. If I hadn't had the experience, well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. But here's where I am, door 1 or door 2. Mark, what are you going to do? Doomed to an alcoholic death or live on a spiritual basis? It goes on to the bottom of the page, if a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, I would have recovered a long time ago. But those codes and philosophies did not save me no matter how much I tried. And it goes on to tell why. Needed power wasn't there. My resources, as marshaled by my will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. Did they? Have they? Will they? Lack of power was my dilemma, not lack of knowledge. I got to find a power by which I could live Take all the stuff we looked at on page 52, for example, your current stuff. I got to find a power by which I can live. It's got to be a power greater than me, obviously. Where and how are we to find the power? Right in your big book, page 55. If lack of power is my dilemma, and this book is going to tell me where and how to find the power, I'm going to want to know where that is, and they'll tell us that on page 55. Then one more sentence, and I'll close for this evening. It says, well, that's exactly what this book is about. The main object of this book is to enable us to find a power greater than ourselves, which will solve our problem. Do you know how often we forget that? This book basically says, Mark, if you'll pursue this course of inaction, you're going to experience a power which will solve your problem. And what I have a tendency to do sometimes is think that I've got to solve this problem. I don't. All I have to do is pursue this spiritual course of action. And this power shows up, and this power solves my problem.
Those of you that have been around for a while, do you remember a time when you were really busy in AA? A lot of effort. Because behind that effort, there was an imaginary list of stuff that you thought you were doing to keep yourself sober. Once you have an experience with the first step and you realize there's nothing I can do to keep myself sober, all of a sudden you're shifted from keeping yourself from the problem to seeking a deeper relationship with the solution that's already keeping you sober. Simple explanation. When I was new, they said, go to meetings, 90 meetings in 90 days, so if one's good, 3 is better, right? Do 180, whatever. Go to meetings, read the book, get a sponsor, work the steps. I hit this bottom at 6 months internally with the unmanageability. I go to Don, and I said, Don, I thought you people told me that if I read the book, went to meetings, worked the steps, and got a sponsor, those are the things that would keep me sober. And I've seen people do more of those things than I'm doing, drink again. He said, no. We hope that all of those things together would get you in touch with a power which is already keeping you sober. And it shifts. That's like a time at York Street in Colorado, in Denver, 1311 York Street, the AA club there. There's a guy who's always new, and he's at the table. I was used to meetings like this right here. 10, 15, 20 people around a table. Leader opens the meeting, blah, 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 gives a topic, everybody shares. And there's a guy at the table everybody at the club knows. He's always new. And then a lady from another club came to chair the meeting. She doesn't know anybody. He's new again. A couple other new people. She says what I think is normal to me. Everybody clapped when John raised his hand, the guy who was always new. Seems normal. And she said, keep coming back. My perception is that's cool. John raises his hand and says, I need to say something. Please don't clap when I'm new, because I get more attention when I'm new than when I stick around for a while. And stop telling me to keep coming back. That's my problem. I think I can. My perception was like, whoop. Numbers in these forwards are quite important to us. In 1976, they said that they had published 300,000 copies and 150,000 people had recovered. One recovery for every 2 books published. In the latest, forward to the 4th edition, 21 million copies of this book have been published. There's not 11,500,000 people sober. What happened? The emphasis went from this to this. 3 kinds of sponsors. One points you toward them, one points you toward you, and one points you to what's real. Okay? One type of sponsor will always tell you, you can do it. Go do this. Don't drink. What's the big deal? Another sponsor will point you toward them, what they can do for you. And another sponsor will point you to something that you have to realize is already there. You're already in the grace of God. If you're an alcoholic, an addict, or whatever, and you're not doing what's going to kill you, you're in the grace of God, unless you've done it yourself. Now, therein lies a form of denial that you and I don't hear talked about a lot in AA. And I know that more people in this room have had it than just myself. That's the great thing about AA. Have you ever had any experience in all the years you've been sober where you were the only one? But think of how much your life felt like that before AA. How unique. How you were the only one that ever felt that way. I've never had anything in 21 years where I felt I'm the only one in in the fellowship that I belong to that's had that. Never had that. Why aren't the numbers the same? How about this one we heard a little earlier? Never say no to an AA request. I've seen that destroy families, children, jobs. That precludes prayer, intuition, intellect, other people that you trust, your wife, your children, your husband. It's a fallacy. I've seen it kill alcoholics. It's putting everything before God. What if God says this weekend you're not supposed to go do that? You're supposed to be with your wife. Or your child needs you this time. What if there's a period of time that probably everyone in this room will have where you can't go to meetings? I had 5 years in a town in India with no home group. Now I always had drunks, and I'll find drunks. I'm like a magnet. If there's a drunk guy in the room, he will pick me out of 300 people and come right to me just to mess with me, right? But I didn't have a home group because I don't believe meetings keep me sober. I don't believe my home group keeps me sober, and I haven't lived in the same city as my sponsor for 15 years. Now we see each other regularly. He doesn't keep me sober because he doesn't think he keeps himself sober. If he can't keep himself sober, how can he keep me sober? Don't use your mind. Don't think too much. Why not? God gave you a brain to use. Take the cotton out of your ears, put it in your mouth. Wow, we haven't. I told a lady from a group in California where they're not allowed to say anything to anyone that she could ask me anything that she wanted while we went through the work and we were friends. She started crying. She said, in 26 years, no one has ever said that to me in AA. I've never been allowed to ask. There's a story about that, and it's about the number of people that want to keep you in your delusions, especially if they're invested in you staying in your delusions. And the story goes like this. A new guy arrives in a new neighborhood, and he wants to go down to the bar for a drink or to an AA meeting, depending on the person. Doesn't matter anymore. They're both the same nowadays. And he goes to the AA meeting or the bar, it doesn't matter, and he's walking in the bar, and a guy's walking out drunk, stumbling out. Gets an invisible car, starts an imaginary engine, and drives off. He goes in, he doesn't say anything to the bartender, or he goes to the meeting, he doesn't say anything because he's told to shut up. Next day, same guy stumbling out of the meeting or the bar. It doesn't matter, they're all the same nowadays. That's just my little addition to the story. And same guy, drunk, comes out, gets an invisible car, starts an imaginary engine, drives off. It's a while before he can even ask the bartender or the secretary of the meeting. It doesn't matter, they're both the same nowadays. He asked the guy, who's that guy that's always stumbling out when I come? He said, oh, he's here every day. He'll be in the bar or he'll be here at the club, and just before the meeting he'll leave, or he'll leave just before you get here to the bar. It doesn't matter. And he'll get in his invisible car and he'll drive around town all night. He'll come back. Finally, after about 3 weeks, he gets up enough nerve to say to the bartender or the secretary of the meeting, why don't you tell the guy the truth? He said, tell him the truth? He's been paying us $500 a month to keep his car clean. Now this one has to come up always, and we're going to get into it more tomorrow. We'll go more in depth with step 1 tomorrow morning. How many in this room believe drug addiction and alcoholism are the same? Well, good. You're either all scared to death to raise your hand, or they're not. Here's the simple question. We could go into a lot of details about it. It's about you finding your own truth. Some people are both. So what do you have to have both? You can't control the amount when you start, and you can't keep yourself stopped once you stop. They both have the spiritual malady. An addict and a heroin addict and you, an alcoholic, can talk about the spiritual malady all day. But he's going to tell you about using a drug. When he uses his drug, his craving goes away and he gets fixed. And you're sitting there wondering, how come when I take my drug, my craving gets stronger and I'm not fixed, it gets worse until I reach that point? How come some drugs the craving gets stronger, some drugs the craving goes away? But here's the simplest question I've been able to find after all these years. If alcoholism and drug addiction are the same, how come there's alcoholics in this room that could take or leave drugs, and how come there's drug addicts in this program that can take or leave alcohol? Now, a drug addict might be powerless over where alcohol would take them. And the sad thing is, it would take them back to a drug that some people tells them their drug of choice. It would really take them back to their drug of no choice. If you're an alcoholic and you've been telling people that your drug of choice is alcohol, you better look at what you mean when you say that, because alcohol's probably your drug of no choice. Now, does that mean an alcoholic could use drugs and not go back to drinking? No. He's going to use drugs, whatever it is, marijuana, pills, whatever, and probably go back to his drug of no choice, because it's the drug that treated the spiritual malady. So you can start with that question. Which drug treated it? Which drug made page 52 go away? And I don't know about you, but I've actually talked to some cocaine addicts where cocaine treated page 52. Straightened them out. It worked. Cocaine agitated page 52 to the point where I'm crawling on the floor hiding in a closet, addicted to cocaine. But is everybody addicted to cocaine a drug addict? A real addict? No. That'd be like saying everybody that drinks alcohol is an alcoholic. Now, how do I say I'm not a drug addict? Some people find out they're both. Mark's a cocaine addict and an alcoholic because of those two factors. Once he starts, he can't control the amount, and once he stops, he can't stay stopped. Every drug I ever did, there came a point, there came a time, there came a day where I made up my mind and walked away from it and never did it again and couldn't quit drinking. I'm the guy that, given a sufficiently strong reason, was able to stop. Walked away from heroin. I said, I don't like where it takes me. Heroin gets me in trouble. Made up my mind, never did it again. I share that with a real addict. Their eyes glaze over and they say, I've tried that 100 times. Cocaine, I had a couple bouts with cocaine. I'm not saying I wasn't physically addicted, but there's a difference between physical addiction and a real addict. That's like the difference between a hard drinker. He can have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. Alcohol might even kill him, but given a sufficiently strong reason, he can make up his mind and stop. Now, does that mean we all didn't come here with a sufficiently strong reason? Yes, we did. But the question is, would that sufficiently strong reason be enough by itself without any program or steps? And you know what? You got hard drinkers and Alcoholics Anonymous all around you that were given a sufficient reason and they were able to stop because they're not all lying. Some of them are in delusion. That's why you got to talk to everybody. When so-and-so, the new person, says, today I have a choice, I just don't drink, I smash my ego, I work on my defects, they're either telling the truth or they're in delusion. But you got to know there's a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous that have a choice today whether they drink again or not, because they're hard drinkers who had a habit. Their drunk-a-law could sound worse than yours circumstantially or even emotionally. It might even have killed them. We have this propensity in AA to say, old Charlie died from drinking. Well, he must have been alcoholic. Not necessarily. They say in our book, it might even kill him. He might even need medical treatment. He might even find it hard. But, given a sufficiently strong reason, he can stop. My truth is that I am a real alcoholic who was a hard drug user. Do I think I can use drugs and not go back to my drug of no choice? No. Do I tell people that aren't alcoholic, that are addicts, that they can drink and get away with it? No. Why is it important? You must start a spiritual process with the truth. We have watched people over the years start a spiritual process with a lie, end up in the 9th step crazier than when they started. Al-Anons talked into that they're alcoholic. Get free, find out they're not alcoholic. Boom, their life takes off. Yeah. So you got to look at what's your truth. You got to start a spiritual process from the truth. We'll see you tomorrow morning.
I want to make one comment on that. This is my experience over the years about your truth in the first step versus alcohol and drugs. And it's a line out of the big book that has to do with identification. For example, you take an alcoholic with very little drug history and you get a crackhead and you try and get those two to talk, and I'm telling you, it's a Martian talking to an Earth person. Identification. I have lost two very, very close friends. They both died of drug overdoses. They were trying to stay clean in Alcoholics Anonymous. One of them had 12 years at one time. I took them through the steps. It was very clear they're not an alcoholic. Every time at an AA meeting they opened their mouth, they said a lie, because they said I'm an alcoholic. They weren't. And they both wound up picking up drugs again and ODing. I've seen too many of them die. I've seen too many of them not feel a part of. So identification is the major reason why Joe and I say, please look at this. If you're both, go where your spirit is led. I do some things in CA. Most of my stuff is done in AA. I've helped a bunch of people find their truth. I got a bunch of people that I've done some work with go to CA only. Little or no history with alcohol. They're right on home. Their recovery is on track. That's why we like to talk to you about, are they different? My experience is yes. Are they different? But this identification is crucial. It's so crucial in this alcoholic and or addict being able to go through this process and get some freedom and get some power. We'll see you tomorrow.
I've heard.
That's what we're talking about here. There's a nice story about some people who were on a raft off the coast of Brazil perishing from thirst. They had no idea that the water they were floating on was fresh water. The river was coming out into the sea with such force it went out for a couple miles, so they had fresh water right where they were, but they had no idea. In the same way, we are surrounded with joy, with happiness, with love. Most people have no idea this whatsoever. The reason? They're brainwashed. The reason? They're hypnotized. They're asleep. Imagine a stage musician who hypnotized someone so the other person sees what is not there and does not see what is there. That's what spirituality and spiritual practices are all about. Repent and accept the good news. Repent, wake up. Do not weep for your sins. Why weep for sins you have committed when you were asleep? I'm going to talk about that later. I was talking to a gentleman yesterday who, on a daily basis, is crucifying himself for mistakes he made, and I said, the reason you're doing that is you think you're involved in making choices to do things that are not in your highest good. Where did you get that idea? I imagine he's still thinking about that this morning, but I'm going to talk more about that. One of the greatest delusions of my life was thinking I was going through life sober, making choices, doing things not in my highest good. And when I finally realized one day that I wasn't making choices, that in fact I've been programmed, and then what has to happen, and it happens through the steps, is I get reprogrammed. The book talks about a psychic change. I'm not making any different choices today. It just looks like it. I've been reprogrammed. I've had a psychic change. That's what happens in the steps. It's not that you're up making choices. More about that later. So why weep for sins? The words, by the way, that word used to bother me till I found out what it means. It means miss the mark. Why weep for sins you committed when you were asleep? Are you going to cry because of what you did in your hypnotized state? Why do you want to identify with a person like that? Wake up, put on a new mind. Take on a new way of looking at things, for the kingdom is here. I said to you the first thing you need to do is wake up, to face the fact that you don't like being awakened. You'd much rather have all the things you were hypnotized into believing are so precious to you, so important to you, so important for your life and your survival. The second thing is to understand. Understand that maybe you've been given the wrong ideas. And it's these ideas that are influencing your life and making it the mess that it's in and keeping you asleep. Ideas about love, ideas about freedom, ideas about happiness, and so forth. And it's not easy listening to someone who would challenge those ideas of yours which have now become so precious to you and which you defend. We live in a society that in the 20th century we killed over 200 million of our fellow human beings. That's how insane it is. I'll tell you what interests me more. What interests me more is a creator who in one cell of my body, they can write 6 books. Each book is one foot in length off one single cell. I'm a lot more interested in finding out about that than I am buying into the insanity that's killed 200 million of my fellow brothers and sisters. Wake up. One other reading called Blame. Though others have faults, always concentrate on your own. Some people have a habit of blaming others. Perhaps all of us have this weakness. The list of scapegoats for our miseries is clever and endless. Parents, community, teachers, government, demons, gods, AA groups are all invoked when we have problems. If difficulties truly come from the outside, then the problem is not blame. For those cases, the course of action is very clear. Neutralize that influence. If the problem comes from within, the solution must come from within as well. Before you blame friends, relatives, or teachers for bad habits and short-sightedness, you should remember no one is to blame but yourself. It's an equal mistake to lose self-esteem simply because you have some flaws. Looking at your shortcomings and taking steps to eliminate them should be viewed as a dispassionate project. That's what happens to us in the steps. You are not worthless because you undertake to rise above your faults. That description is only for those who never attempt to perfect themselves. We all have a perfect core, a special self inside. That purity is perfect and holy. Therefore, no one is worse than another. We're all on this planet simply to reach back into that pure self. When we reach that spirit, there are no flaws and there's no one to blame. Let's take a couple minutes and close our eyes and go within ourselves. Reach that place of silence that we have within ourselves. Ask God to be with us today and let us go through this day with an open mind and an open heart, a sense of gratefulness for the fact that we're here this morning, we're sober and we're breathing and above the ground instead of under it, with a body that's functioning and works. An incredible number of things that we so take for granted, like our breath, all of those things, the friends that are in our lives. Let's have a sense of appreciation in the silence. Very much. Now I'll turn this over to Joe and we'll get started taping.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Joe. I'm an alcoholic. I'd like to share a prayer that I shared last night. God, we invite you into this room to guide and direct each of us as we seek your truth. Father, please set aside within each of us that which would block us off from the truth. Lay aside our prejudices about what we think we know about this process, this weekend, our spiritual condition. Remove our fears, Lord, that we may hear your truth through the members of this group, and give us the strength and courage to share your truth with each other in a real spirit of love and compassion for our fellow man. Amen. I wonder, I have a really spiritual book with me today. It's called Today I Will Nourish My Inner Martyr. Affirmations for Cynics, written by two women from New York who are in Alcoholics Anonymous. Have you ever read New Age affirmations and after you read one you just feel horrible because you know you'll never be like a perfect child of the universe or whatever it says? I have a theory that real alcoholics and real drug addicts read these kind of affirmations and feel much better than the kind of affirmations that they'll never. So you can see if after I read a couple of these, it doesn't make you feel so discouraged like those other ones. We'll just see what I turn to here. Today I will read a magazine or book while someone is communicating their deep emotional needs to me. See? I will remind myself today that sex really does equal love. Today, just for the fun of it, I will do something unethical just to buck the system. Today I will realize my anger is the only thing that makes me powerful. Today I have the right to project my own inadequacies onto other people. Today I will realize my perceptions are worthless and misleading. Today I will realize the best years of my life are over. They weren't exactly good years, but nonetheless they are over. Today it is okay to have faith. No, I'm sorry. Today it is okay to have no faith in anything. So that's a couple of affirmations for cynics. I heard a story one time about the people that are here this morning. And it's about taking 100, it's interesting because there's probably about 100 people here. You take 100 people from the program, God forbid, but you put them back in the bar. And what you'll find is about 20 or 30 will sit belly to the bar, crying in their beer, wallowing in their crap, because that's all they think there is in alcohol. 20 or 30 will be in the middle of the room, and they'll just drink till they feel better, and then they'll go home. Then you'll find about 20 or 30 mad dogs. They won't settle for sitting at the bar wallowing in their crap because they know there's more to find in alcohol. They won't settle for sitting in the middle of the room just drinking until they feel good, because that's just where the night begins. Remember when you used to have to drink before you went to the bar? And then the other 30 are in and out of the bar, going here, going there, going for the gusto, do it to the max, bop till you drop. Mad dogs, and they won't settle for the other two groups. Now you put them back in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and you'll find that those 100 people settle for about the same thing they did when they were drinking. 20 or 30 will sit at these tables and whine and complain because they do not know that there's a solution. 20 or 30 will sit in the middle of these rooms, do just enough to feel better and stay comfortable, and go home. And then there's 20 or 30 mad dogs. So what we have here this morning are the mad dogs. I wanted to say one thing about the first tradition that I've seen, and Mark and I have been talking about, we see all over this country. I believe, and I don't read to read it, but I think the first tradition says that our common welfare comes first. How often do you really put that into action in your group, your family, work? One of the saddest things I've ever heard in Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't know if they read it out here, but in California, a lot of the meetings, even in the format, before they read the 12 traditions, they'll make a statement. The traditions are to the group what the steps are to the individual. They've just told you that 1/3 of our program has no value for you, just for the other people. And if you're like me and you're new and you're selfish, and somebody says, you know, what you're going to get is going to come from the steps and not the traditions are for the group, what are you going to do, right? My sponsor told me this is a 3-part program, Unity, Recovery, and Service, for a 3-part disease, body, mind, and spirit, with 36 spiritual principles. 12 steps for recovery, 12 traditions for unity, and 12 concepts of service. And that there were as many principles in the traditions that I could practice in my life whenever I'm dealing with more than one person as there are in the steps. And that it would help to work the steps first, to get some power in my life, to be able to practice those other principles that you can practice in all your affairs. So the first tradition says that our common welfare comes first, and that my survival, my personal recovery, depends on the unity of this group. So isn't it true the other way around? Here's what I mean. If my personal recovery, my life, my survival depends on the unity of this group, wouldn't it be true that the unity of the group depends on your personal recovery? Because what we see happening around this country among people that do the work is division, gossip, slander. And if their personal recovery had to do with continuing to do the work, making amends, staying clear with friends, that the unity of that group would also be strengthened. So one feeds the other as the other feeds the other. Another thing I wanted to talk about, because if you go into the work with an intent or a focus, that's pretty much going to be your focus. I've heard people told you're going to do the work so you can work on your character defects, or get in touch with your inner child, or find out patterns, or learn about yourself. But if you went into the work somewhere in the first step realizing there's nothing I can do to keep myself sober, therefore I'm doing these things that I've been given the power to do to seek that which already is keeping me sober, the focus can change. I was honored one time to take a friend of ours that Gene and I know through the steps when he had a lot more sobriety than I did. And I remember I shared last night, I made it 6 months in the grace of God, and I was ready to die. I moved to Los Angeles when I was 5 years sober, and one of the main slogans in South Central Los Angeles is, grace is sufficient. I have found that not to be true. We have seen a lot of alcoholics, you have known alcoholics, that are in the grace of God, drink again. So this man asked me to take him through the work, and he's gone many years without really doing much work. He was tied deeply to the fellowship and service and commitment and showing up and suiting up. And at 26 years sober, he was dying of untreated alcoholism. Not uncommon even among those that do the work. The ego rebuilds. he asked me to take him through the work. He met my sponsor, his sponsor, and he met Don Pritz and Gary Brown and Paul Martin in the Music City Roundup in Nashville. And he heard something. We get back to LA. I'm the one that lives there, so he stuck with me, the youngest one of those four. I think that was his deal. And we started, and I gave him the prayer. Pray to whatever you believe in, that what you think you know be set aside for an open mind and a new experience. He calls me in a few weeks and he says, I have a problem. I said, I know you do. What do you think it is? He said, well, for 26 years I've lived in the grace of God. I said, no doubt. He said, I've realized it, I've sat with it, I've seen it in every area of my life. Why do I, and someone asked this last night, why do I need to do the work in the 12 steps if I've lived in the grace of God for a number of years? I said, I have no idea. I made it 6 months. I was ready to blow my head off. You better pray about that. I didn't hear from him a week, 2 weeks. I thought, well, there goes another one that just with the basic assignment. You know, read the first 164 pages and answer these questions. Is this work what I want to do? Am I willing to go to any length? Why do I need to do it? Why with me? And where are you being dishonest currently with yourself and others? I thought to myself, you know, he's not going to do it. And he calls me after about 3 weeks and he says, can I come over? I said, sure. He comes over and he says, I know now why I need to do the work. I said, why? He said, well, number one, because I'm alcoholic, but also because I would like to have a conscious contact with that which has been giving me this grace for 26 years. About a year and a half later, he finished amends for the first time in his life, every amends that he was consciously aware of from his life and his sobriety. And he said to me that living in the grace of God and having a conscious contact with that which is giving you the grace is like night and day. I heard my sponsor put it much more simple not too long ago. I was listening to some of his tapes on a drive that I took, and he said, we do not do these things to stay sober. We do these things because we are sober by the grace of God. Yeah. So we're hoping to spend the entire morning on steps 1, 2, and 3, the entire afternoon on steps 4 through 9, and tomorrow morning on steps 10, 11, and 12. So let's get into it.
Mark, alcoholic. I want to read a couple things. Speak to me about the steps. While looking at the mind, you cannot go beyond it. To go beyond it, you must look away from the mind and its contents. We are slaves to what we do not know. I was a slave to alcohol and or untreated alcoholism till somebody took me through the book and had me look at my first step experience. I told you over the years I sponsored a lot of relapsers, and most of them have not found it necessary to drink once someone took them through the book, like the book says to go through the book. I made a statement to you last night around this first step that the most insane act that I will ever commit, I will commit from a position of sobriety. And that is that my mind will tell me to take a drink. And if I think I'm involved with that decision, then I don't know what my first step is. I don't know what powerlessness is. And the end result of that is I won't pursue the course of action as outlined in the big book. I won't do steps 2 through 9. I won't make all my amends. I won't work with the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12. So knowing your truth in the first step is absolutely essential to bring about the willingness to do the rest of the work. And from that position, from that foundation, the book talks about we're building a spiritual arch through which we walk a free man and a free woman. That foundation is your truth. The god-awful truth that to drink is to die, and that you will do that on your power. That becomes the foundation, the bedrock, upon which all the rest of the course of action begins to take place. We've talked about that repeatedly of right inventory, die an alcoholic death. See, if you keep it in those contexts, writing inventory seems fairly simple, does it not? Let's see, pay the money back, die an alcoholic death. Just, it's not complex stuff, is it? Manner of living which demands rigorous honesty, die an alcoholic death.